Croissants are made with laminated dough. Laminating is accomplished by encasing a block of butter in the dough to create 5 layers. 3 layers of dough and 2 layers of butter. This mixture is then rolled out and folded several times to create alternating layers of butter and dough. The goal is to maintain the integrity of each layer, producing a product that is light and flaky. The leavening in the laminated dough comes mainly from the steam that's generated by the moisture in the butter during the baking process. As the steam expands in the oven, it lifts and separates the layers of dough. Other factors to keep in mind for a successful lamination includes using a dough that has a well-developed gluten structure to be able to support that steam expansion, and the butter must be rolled out evenly in the continuous layers. And last, the butter and dough should remain at approximately the same temperature. To prepare the dough, measure all the ingredients and set them out in front of you. It is also important to have all the equipment and tools needed for the task at hand. Proper mise en place is imperative in all culinary preparations. In the bowl of the mixer fitted with a dough hook attachment, combine the sugar, salt, and 75% of the water. We're going to sprinkle the flour that's been sifted over the mixture and allow it to hydrate for 30 minutes. We've dissolved the yeast in the remaining water. Now we're going to add it to the flour mixture. You want to be careful never to add the yeast directly to the salt solution because the salt inhibits the yeast activity. We're going to let these ingredients mix until it's thoroughly incorporated with the water and flour together. It's pretty well incorporated. Now we're going to add the butter. In this case, it's shortening. Now we're going to let this consistency adjust as it mixes. Flour absorption is always variable based on the temperature of the liquid. We're going to let the dough mix and develop the gluten, and we're going to test by stretching the dough. Okay, the dough looks well developed. We want to check that. What I want to do is a window test, and you want to see the gluten development. You should be able to stretch it without it tearing to where you can see some light through the dough. Now we're going to put this dough on this paper-lined sheet pan so that we can refrigerate it and let that gluten relax for 30 minutes or so. And I want to get a rectangular shape that'll be easier for rolling when we prepare our lamination. The next step is an important part to the successful lamination. The butter needs to be at a plastic stage. It must be at the right temperature to roll out easily without breaking into pieces. It must be firm enough not to ooze out of the dough or allow moisture to seep into the dough. We can knead the butter in a baker's margarine or a combination of the two until they're pliable and spread it out on parchment paper 1/2 inch thick and in the shape of a rectangle. In this case, what I've done was slice the butter into rectangular shapes. I'm going to finish this one. I'm going to sprinkle a little flour on the butter. That's going to help it from sticking, and it's also going to help keep some of that moisture under control. Roll it slightly with a rolling pin so all the butter becomes one rectangular piece. We're going to refrigerate this butter and we're going to chill it till it's the same consistency as the dough. Around 65 degrees will be adequate. Okay, the dough and the butter are both at 65 degrees, well relaxed. We're going to roll the dough into a rectangle that's about 1/3 larger than the butter on a floured table. It's important to put a lot of flour down. You can always brush the excess off, and you do not want the dough to stick. Roll the dough into a rectangle that is 1/3 larger than the butter layer. Roll from the center of the dough to the outside edges. That's about the size of a sheet pan. Now I want to brush off the extra flour so that we don't have the layers separated by flour. Now the butter is on 2/3 of the dough. We're going to fold 1/3 of the dough that's not covered with butter over half of the butter. This is going to be a 3-fold or a letter fold method. Again, brush off the excess flour. The dough has now 5 layers. 3 layers of dough and 2 layers of butter in between. We're going to seal the ends and the sides, refrigerate, and let the dough rest for 30 minutes between each rolling and folding procedure. Do not allow the dough to become warm during this process or too cold, which may cause the butter to crack. Resting the dough between each rolling and folding allows the gluten structure to relax, making the dough easier to roll out and less likely to tear. If overworked laminated dough will become too tough, then the finished product won't have the desired volume or texture. The rolling and folding procedure is as follows. With the seam facing you, roll out the dough into a rectangle twice the size of a sheet pan. Here's the seam. I'm rolling from the inside to the outside, from the center. Brush off any extra flour, giving the dough a 3-fold, and we'll refrigerate it for another 30 minutes. Place a finger indentation at one end of the dough. When a baker has many doughs in the refrigerator, it's important to keep track of how many folding processes have been done. We're going to repeat these steps 3 times total for each dough. After the folding process is complete, refrigerate the dough for 12 to 24 hours before makeup. At this point, the dough can be frozen for up to 3 weeks. Beyond that, the yeast will lose some potency. Thaw the dough in the refrigerator 24 hours before using it as well. I'm going to cut a little bit of the dough to make it a little more manageable to roll out. I'm going to dust the flour, and to make up the croissants, we're going to roll out the dough and trim the edges to create an even rectangle. Always make sure that you have plenty of flour underneath. Notice I can move the dough. We want the dough to be about a little more than 1/4 of an inch thick. I'm going to trim it to a nice even rectangle. And you can roll that out anywhere between 8 to 12 inches in width. Now, using a croissant cutter or a pastry cutter, we're going to divide the dough into even triangles. The wheel is 4 inches wide, so I'm going to use this to mark my 4-inch widths. We'll start by making rectangles. And then we're going to cut the rectangles into halves, corner to corner. You can see my triangles. Any of the trimmings we can save and we can rework those doughs. I'm going to cut a 1/2 inch notch in the center of each triangle, just a short part of the end at the wide part of the base. This will allow me to make a little more width when I get ready to shape that croissant. At this point, we can place any desired filling in the center, and then we begin to roll them up. We're going to roll up to the pointed end of the dough, placing each croissant on a sheet pan to get ready for the oven. We're going to brush each croissant with some egg wash. Some chefs like to put 2 layers of egg wash. They'll actually do it twice for a better shine. The tail of the croissant should be underneath. If it's on top, it can turn up and bake and it'll probably burn. We're going to place it on the pan underneath. We're going to proof the croissants at 85 degrees until they double in size. Proofing at this temperature will help prevent the butter from melting. It'll also keep it from leaking out of the dough as it's proofing. Once proofed, we're going to bake the croissants off at 375 degrees until golden brown. I have some croissants in the oven that have been baking. They're about finished right now, so let's pull them out and take a look. We want to let them cool to room temperature. Oh, look at that. Beautiful golden brown. You can see the egg wash did its job. You can change the temperature of the oven according to the type of oven you might be using when you're baking off a croissant.